Gary Cook. I work with Greenpeace and head up the Rethink IT campaign and author of the Click Clean reports for data center operators. The challenge we're putting to the data center industry is how can you build the global infrastructure for data centers and internet infrastructure to be renewably powered within 10 years. And a big part of that starts with where you put your data centers. And if you look at location, what you're solving for in terms of energy supply, it really varies by location. So it needs to be top of mind when you're building new data centers. You may have better options to buy renewable energy in one location, or it may be green already, depending on where you are. But that needs to be really thought about. And I think the hyperscale companies have been really good about is they're expanding, making sure they're locating places that's going to allow them to make progress toward the renewable goals. But it doesn't stop with procurement. So it starts with location, you can then have procurement. Ultimately, it's going to be about being an advocate, pushing governments, pushing utilities to say, hey, we have huge power demands. They're only going to get bigger. We need to have options to buy from the grid the supply of energy we need to meet our goals. I think it's taken many different forms. I think initially you started out with partnership from very large companies like Google and Facebook signing partnerships directly with renewable energy developers. I think ultimately to make this scalable, you need to have it be much easier for customers who are smaller, maybe have less capital resources available to be able to buy new renewables to meet their growing needs. And so that really should be the role of the utility or otherwise the electricity service provider where you're building your data center to do that. That's been slow in coming, and I think but the good news is because the cost of renewables is coming way down, they're hearing more and more from their customers. You see more utilities being willing to work with smaller customers and not just the Facebooks and Googles of the world. The move to edge has could pose additional challenges for the sector, simply because you're having more decentralized demand, and it makes the economics of buying a matching power supply of renewable sources more challenging potentially. And so the move to edge, if you suddenly had a big explosion in edge computing that is using in places where the grid is quite dirty, that can really take the sector in the wrong direction. I think it's a challenge you currently have already with telecommunications companies who have base stations, who are very decentralized. They can't buy one project of renewables to meet that load, and so they have to get engaged in much smaller levels of demand everywhere they are. And they haven't made a lot of progress with that. So I think it's from the data center sector, as they're moving more to edge model, how can they make new mistakes and make more progress than what the telecoms have done so far? I think DCD should be inviting, not just Greenpeace, but having regular, briefings from renewable energy developers and climate scientists, so people understand the system response the data centers are creating and grid operators, and how you have a huge investment. How is this demand having on the electricity grid? How is it helping or hurting the ability for governments to hit their climate change targets? You hear from a relatively small set of industry experts in these meetings. I'd say DCD should be trying to bring more of the outside world that are looking at trying to solve these problems for climate change and renewable energy solutions. It's definitely useful to have other messengers besides Greenpeace, and people feel like, okay, it's not just Greenpeace saying this. This is, I hear about this on there, but it needs to contextualize it within what the environment you're solving for. People don't understand how rapid the transition, how tough it's going to be to make this transition, and how critical it is. People here who are designing this infrastructure have a critical role in whether we hit the targets we have to hit. But people here are making big investments that have big impacts on demand. And so this, to me, is why we've stayed so focused on the data center sector, just because you're building the infrastructure of the future. It needs to be powered with sources that we can rely on and not take us in the wrong direction.